Hello, everyone. If you're just joining us, thank you so much for joining us today for our special speaker event with Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali. We're really happy to have you here. Please check this first slide and introduce yourself in the chat. If you want to just say your name, your pronouns, whose indigenous lands you're calling on, and just a little bit about why you're here. That would be really helpful. Thanks so much, and we'll get started in just a few minutes. Alrighty, everyone. As people are flowing in, we wanted to start off by introducing Witty Youngman, who is our guest musician here for today. She's going to help us ground us and play a few songs to get us started. After that, we'll be happy to start the program and introduce Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali. Thanks so much for joining us. Witty, you want to take it away?
Sure. Thank you, Kingo. My name is Witty. My pronouns are they, them. I am a guitarist as well as a vocalist. I've been playing around Anchorage at different events for about, I think it'll be 6 years now. So I'd like to take into consideration the theme of the song. It's kind of about like keeping your eye on the vision and not being reactionary. This song is written by one of my friends, Jason, back home. It's called Over Seasons. Over seasons, like so many times before, drop, drop, drop till you break down them walls. Over seasons, when you come not obey, keep on dropping till the break of the day. Over seasons, like so many times before, drop, drop, drop till you break down the walls. Over seasons, when you come not obey, drop, 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 drop. Back in 1994, there was no reason that we had wanted to play, but a vision of expression, an ability to reason with the worries in our lives, an ability we'd recognized. How many times will composition turn into confession, building foundation for youth and grow into progression. Like in the days we will reside, and we say, oh, that you know things ain't right. When the pressure that you're granted from this life, and forever you have wondered what's in store, till you stand up and not take it anymore. Yeah, over seasons, like so many times before, drop, drop, drop till you break down the walls. Over seasons, when you come disobey, keep drop, drop until the break of the day. Over seasons, like so many times before, drop, drop, drop till you break down the walls. Over seasons, when you come disobey, keep drop, 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 drop. Doubted about them things that you do, defiant of your scattered mental instinct too. No second guessing when it's already past, denying that it wouldn't last. Here to the day, here to the nights, throughout the years, how many fights? Here's to the days that paved the way, and we say that you know things ain't right. And the pressures that you granted from this life, and forever you have wondered what's in store, till you cannot stand it anymore. And over seasons, like so many times before, drop, drop, drop till you break down the walls. Over seasons, when you come disobey, keep drop, drop until the break of the day. Over seasons, like so many times before, keep dropping till you break down the walls. Over seasons, when you come disobey, keep dropping, oh yeah, yeah, oh, 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 like we done before, oh yeah. over seasons. Like so many times before, keep dropping till we break down the walls of the seasons. When you come disobey, keep dropping till the break of the day over seasons. Like so many times before, keep dropping till we break down the walls of the seasons. When you come not obey, keep dropping till the break of the day over seasons. Yeah. Thank you. So the next song that I chose two songs. This next one is an old Tears for Fears song. It's called Everybody Wants to Rule the World. Welcome to your life. There's no turning back. Well, even while we sleep, we will find you acting on your best behavior. Turn your back on Mother Nature, and everybody wants to rule the world. Well, it's my own design. Yeah, it's my own remorse. Help me to decide and help me make the most of freedom and of pleasure. 'Cause nothing ever lasts forever. Everybody wants to rule the world. There's a room where the light won't find you, holding hands while your walls come tumbling down. When they do, I'll be right behind you. So glad we almost made it. So sad they had to fade it. Everybody wants to rule. Indecision, married with a lack of vision. Everybody wants to rule the world. Say that you never need it. One headline, why believe it? Everybody wants to rule the world. All for freedom and for pleasure, 'cause nothing ever lasts forever. Everybody wants to rule the world. Thank you. Oh, the beautiful wave of all the clapping hands.
Thank you so much, Witty. Really beautiful way to start this day. I want to welcome everyone. I'm just so happy to see all the faces and have everybody's energy here today. My name is Polly Carr. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a mother of a 9-year-old daughter, and I'm executive director of the Alaska Center and the Alaska Center Education Fund. If you're new to us, our organizations share a vision of a thriving, just, and sustainable Alaska for future generations. Together, we are engaging and also electing Alaskans who stand up for clean air and water, healthy communities, and a strong democracy. Today's webinar is part of a week-long set of activities that were planned as a part of our original annual auction and celebration. To learn more about that event and our work, I think there'll be a link shared in the chat box. Um, our theme for this week is Vision for Our Future. We have been facing an economic crisis and a climate crisis and now a health crisis. And the pandemic has elevated the inequities of our broken systems and the extractive economy that we're living in. Our democracy, our health, our air, water, food, and our communities are under attack as these systems are collapsing. And the racial injustices that are a part of these broken systems are being felt hard across our communities and nation. This moment, however, has also illuminated the urgency, and I will say the opportunity, to put a different vision forward. And that vision is up to all of us. So I am incredibly grateful that on this day, on this week, we are going to be graced by the generous and articulate voice of Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali to talk about all of these things with us. I'm going to now turn it to Kahinjik Alexander, who will center us with a land acknowledgement.
All right. Shori Kahinjik Ojri. I want to start off our event today by giving land acknowledgement and say that I am on ancestral territory and valued traditional territory of the Tanana, the indigenous peoples of this land, and the indigenous people all around Alaska that never surrendered their lands or resources to Russia or the United States. We acknowledge that this not only is in thanks to the indigenous communities who have stewarded, cared for, and held relationship with the land for generations, but also in recognition of the historical and ongoing legacy of colonialism. Additionally, we acknowledge that this as a point of a reflection for us as we work towards dismantling colonial practices. I'll pass it on to Alyssa.
Thank you, Kahinjik, for that grounding to us and to these lands and the space that we're in. Grounding ourselves and being present in the places that we're in is key to envisioning what our futures can be like. In a moment, we'll be guided through a visioning exercise where we can really dig deep and try to think about and create the futures that we all need, and think about how we can get there together. All visions center art and creativity. And to help us spark our ideas and goals, we gathered work from artists and poets from around the state that centered these themes of empowerment, just transition, community, and our futures. And to guide us through that exercise, I'm honored to introduce our keynote speaker and our friend, Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali. Mustafa, longstanding environmental justice advocate, leader, international speaker, artist, community liaison, trainer, facilitator, the list goes on. He is the former vice president of environmental justice, climate, and community revitalization for the National Wildlife Federation, founder and CEO of Revitalization Strategies, and former senior vice president for the Hip Hop Caucus. From connecting and uplifting youth across the nation to advocating for environmental protections in the White House, he continues to inspire us and gives us the tools to connect and uplift ourselves and our movement and make the changes that we need to see. I'm elated to have this opportunity to meet you and be able to create this event together, having all of you join us here. Mustafa.
Thank you, and I'm honored to be here. Thank you to the Alaska Center. Thank you to all the incredible young leaders. Sometimes people say young people. I know that that's not true. It's young leaders. I just want to thank you all so much. And thank you for the land acknowledgement. I will here on my end also honor all my indigenous brothers and sisters who allow me to actually occupy this space, the Piscataway, the Pamunkey, and the other indigenous brothers and sisters who helped to make sure that the land was thriving and surviving. I say thank you. And these come that we move forward, can communities move in, that our governments move in, and of course, our world. So I wanted to start off by asking everyone who's on the line to actually think about four things and just throw them into the chat. And you can choose if you want to answer for all four, or maybe you only want to answer for one of them. But I want you to think about, in relationship to a vision, what do you want your community to look like in the next year? And you know, a year used to seem like a long time, but we've seen how many changes can actually happen in that short amount of time. So the first part is, what do you want to see your community look like in the next year? What do you want to see your state look like in the next year? And then the question becomes, what do you want our country to look like in the next year? And then I want you to think a little bit further out, in the next 5 years. And you can just, and we're going to actually have folks be able to share a little bit about that as we move further into our time here together. So I'm seeing that I'm freezing a little bit. So I'll say that once again. The question is, what do you want your community to look like in the next year, your state, our country, and then in the next 5 years, what do you want our planet to look like? Really incredible things being shared right now in the chat. We have some incredible artwork that has been done and is being shared of folks' vision of what our world can look like, what our communities can look like, our relationship to them. And how do we honor Mother Earth, which is the first principle of the environmental justice movement. Of the 17 principles, the first one that was chosen was how and of course that connects our states, our government, and our planet. And I see people sharing with us that their vision is about leadership and it's about power. It's about indigenous authority. It's about our love of our land and of our culture and of our people and the strength that comes from that. It's also our connection to wildlife, into our public spaces. And it's also about economics, our economic structures, and how do we make sure that they're truly equitable? And how do we make sure that we have a just transition that makes sure that everyone can benefit from a new clean economy? So it really all comes back to us and the power that lives inside of us, the power that has been shared with us from our ancestors and those elders who are still with us, and the change that can and will happen if we're willing to put in the work that's necessary to build the partnerships that will help us to actually be able to achieve this goal, and to make sure that we are honoring that people of color have to have a leading and a driving voice in the process. So I want to thank everyone who's continuing to build on our vision and continuing to drop those very important words and ideas and concepts into the box. So with that being said, I think we're now going to begin to transition to our sharing today. So again, I just want to thank the Alaska Center, and I want to thank all of you. And I believe that there are going to be some slides that are going to pop up here. And really they are pictures They are everyday folks who have continued to give, to face the injustices, but also to focus on the vision and the opportunities that are in front of us. And I just want to anchor us in the fact that these may be very challenging times. We may find ourselves in a moment of crisis, but where our elders and our ancestors have shown us before that in these trying times, these crises that come up, that we can actually win on them. Everything from the women's suffrage movement, when there were a whole lot of people who said that women would never have the right to vote, and we proved that wrong by people coming together. We also know there in Alaska, you know, you were a part of the first actions around addressing Jim Crowism and making sure that Native peoples had rights. And then, of course, the civil rights movement that was happening in the South in the lower 48. And then the environmental movement and how we had to come together because of all these changes that needed to happen. But of course, we know that it is our voices and our power that actually helps to make real change actually happen. And we've seen the injustices that have happened. You turn on the television and we're seeing them today with deaths that continue to happen at the hands of police and others. But we continue to push forward through partnerships, through our activism to make it. And we also know that we've got these environmental impacts, these injustices that continue to happen around the country. We've got 100,000 people who are dying prematurely from air pollution every year. And we have to come together to be able to address this. We've got 24 million people who have asthma and 7 million kids. And we know that this is one of the factors that is also playing a role in COVID-19 and causing some of these challenges that we currently face. We have places around our country, like in Detroit, especially on the south side of Detroit, the 48217 has the highest levels of pollution in the entire state of Michigan. And we have places like the Manchester community in Houston, Texas, which is a hardworking Latin. When you go to their community challenges, these urban areas, that they're also in rural.
Hello, thank you.
And
Thank you. Have a good day. You too.
And in those rural areas, you know, we also know that many of our national parks pollution. It doesn't matter what's together to help make change happen, because we get these chronic medical conditions that people are dealing with when they're located closely to these polluting facilities. And we have more folks who are dying from air pollution and are dying from gun violence, who are dying from car crashes, or dying from a number of the other things that we all work on and pay attention to. And we know that if we're not focused, if we're not building collaborative partnerships, that we're not going to be able to help people to move from surviving to thriving. But we also know that there are lots of challenges that are happening across the country in relationship to water. I know everybody in the room remembers Flint, Michigan, and the challenges that many young people are now facing as a result of being exposed to lead. We've got over 1 million kids who've been exposed to lead and the impacts that it's making on their lives, and also, again, tying back to some of the impacts that we find that are happening from the coronavirus because of chronic medical conditions. But we also know that people are willing to come together. And being and working at the Hip Hop Caucus, I was blessed to be surrounded by so many incredible artists and entertainers. And it was such a blessing to have the songs that were shared with us early on, and making sure that that's a part of our paradigm for success. But we also know that we have to address these fossil fuels and the utilization, especially on the pipelines. Most people sometimes forget that we've got 2.4 million miles of pipeline. That's enough to go to the moon and back, and then to go to the moon and back again. So we have to be focused on beginning to eliminate that need. And of course, our brothers and sisters at Standing Rock helped us to understand why that fight was so important. On one side, protecting culture. On the other side, making sure that we are also protecting our water. As many have said, water is life, and it's all the more apparent now in dealing with the coronavirus, where we find that we've got 500,000+ people who are homeless and who don't have access to clean water. So it's hard for them to deal with. We also know that we've had this water, but also impacting wildlife and also impacting our natural spaces. So we all come together, and they're incredible folks who are doing just amazing work in that space to, one, help people to actually have access to clean drinking water. We've got folks in Flint, Michigan, in Detroit, in Alabama, in California, who are coming together and finding ways of making sure that both on the policy side, but also just on the everyday human side of helping folks to be able to have that water, going out and purchasing and making sure that our elders and others have that water that's so incredibly critical. And we also know that because of this pollution, it's also impacting our lakes, impacting our rivers, causing all these algae blooms, causing the loss of many of our natural resources in the sense of salmon and other fish that have been disappearing because folks didn't want to do the right thing in the beginning. And we know that in Alaska that's going on, as well as many of the other states across our country. And of course, fracking is a serious issue that we still have to wrestle with and have to make sure that people, have the opportunity to not be impacted by that. And that's a part of our just transition. It is a part of us moving to the right types of energy sources to be able to make real change happen, but change happening in a way that actually is inclusive, change that is necessary, because when we don't do that, we're going to have to deal with these impacts that are happening from climate change. I was at Katrina a couple of days after it happened, and I remember seeing all the people who had lost lives and who had lost homes, and then all the people who were being pushed into the Superdome. And there were over 10,000 people who were being pushed, who were dislocated at that time. And seeing how folks were looking for a pathway forward. And we see this playing out again and again and again, whether it's with Hurricane Maria, whether it's with the wildfires that we see going on, whether it's in Puerto Rico, when the storms came through, that people literally were so desperate for water that they were willing to go to Superfund sites to actually get water that was there, even though it was tainted with very toxic levels of pollution. So we have to make sure that we are addressing what's happening in the climate emergency. Because if we don't, we know there in Alaska, we know in other locations across our planet, that we're going to continue to lose loved ones. We're going to continue to lose our precious resources, and that we can also end up eroding our culture if we're not focused on what needs to happen. The beauty of the moment is that we've all began to slow down a little bit. And we began to see that many of the things that we thought were important were not as important as we may have thought, that we can make change happen. We've seen that as there's been less use of transportation, that the emissions started to come down. We've seen that water bodies are starting to clear up, and that fish and mammals and other things are starting to move back into their traditional spaces. And that is all a part of the change that can and will happen if we are willing to continue to lean in. And that's why I'm so blessed that there are so many incredible young people across the planet who are doing all of the things that are necessary to make change happen. Whether we're talking about folks with the Sunrise Movement who I've worked with, or folks with This Is Zero Hour, or the Extinction Rebellion, or Fire Drill Fridays, all of these incredible young leaders coming together and marching, but moving past marching and actually holding people accountable. Each and every one of you have the ability to make that change happen. But we have our strength by literally coming together and finding our commonalities instead of our differences. And the beauty of young people is that you guys don't get hung up on the isms that many of folks who are a bit older do. You know, you're finding ways of making sure that racism and sexism and ageism and many of the others are not a part of paradigm that you allow to frame out the directions that the country go in. And even in this moment, when people say that we're dealing with one of the greatest emergencies of our time, people are coming together and doing incredible things. You have folks in Georgia who have pulled together emergency kits for frontline communities. And these are frontline organizations who created 5,000 emergency kits, and they've actually been able to get those out to folks. You have folks who saw our homeless brothers and sisters and said, this is unacceptable, and began to get portable showers and portable sinks to make sure that they had what they needed in that moment, and then began to focus on making sure that there was housing where they could be safe in this moment and moving forward. You also have other folks who are doing some incredible things in the food justice space, where there are faith-based organizations and frontline communities and others who have come together and who are planting produce and making sure that it's locally grown, that it's organically grown, and that they are also then sharing that with the folks who need it the most to address the food deserts and the food insecurity issues that are going on. You've got folks at the Green Door Initiative, young people who are actually being a part of worker training programs. And they are literally helping by going out and making sure after they go through the training that they are the ones who are helping to keep people safe in this COVID-19 moment. Before they were doing hazmat training, and now they're doing other trainings that's necessary to be able to make sure that folks are safe and protected. And the beauty of that is that there are returning citizens that are joining with young people to make that change happen. And they're also focusing on the legislation that's necessary, both on the local level and the county level, the state level, and in the federal level. They're making sure that their voices are a part of it. But they're also injustices of those, whether it's the Muslim bans that were going on, or now the issues that are going on with COVID-19 and the continuing with police brutality. Everyone is coming together to make real change happen. And change is also happening from artists and entertainers, as you've seen with the slideshow, that they are playing a critical role in also helping to highlight all the good work that's happening, but also the challenges that are in that space. Everyone from Beyonce to Jay-Z to a number of other folks, Chance the Rapper and some of the other folks that we've worked with are all giving their voice to help to make change happen. And we know that we also have the ability to help to frame out that cultural narrative that will then push the culture in the right direction. We do it through poetry. We do it through the incredible voices like the ones that we had when we first started here today. Through other forms of phones. We have stories to capture our stories, to make sure that the world is hearing our stories, and bringing all these various voices together are some of the ways that we can actually make real change happen. So the question is, are we willing to do that? Are we willing to actually bring folks together and to honor each other to make the change that's necessary? And for those of us who are almost 18 or who are over that number, one of the ways that we can also make change happen is by making sure that we are utilizing our vote and making sure that even if we're not yet old enough to vote, that we're getting engaged in the process of helping others to understand the power that exists inside of their vote, so that we can make sure that we're not only making change happen in this moment, but for the next generation and the generation that follows after that. I'll share this with you all as I begin to close. There was a person who was around before any of us were, but most people know his name, and his name was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And he shared with us a long time ago that we come to these shores in different ships. And that's for some of us. Of course, there were those of us who are already here. But he said, we come to these shores in different ships, but we're all in the same boat now. I want you to think about that in relationship to the vision that you had when we were starting this exercise of around visioning. But I also want you to think about it in relationship to COVID-19. I want you to think about it in relationship to environmental injustices that continue to happen. And I want you to think about it in relationship to climate change, because we can no longer be separated. And I know the incredible work that the Alaska Center is doing, that all of you are doing, is focused on bringing people together. But I want you to think about, how do we broaden that out? How do we make sure that more voices are coming in to the mix that are helping us to make sure that we're framing out the direction that we all need to go? And of course, you have to play an incredibly important role in that as young leaders, because the reality of the situation is that this world is going to be yours for a long time. And I know that all of us want to make sure that it is healthy and sustainable and thriving as possible, but we also want to make sure that it is equitable. And we can all make sure that we are honoring Mother Earth. So I want you all to do one last thing with me before we move on. And I want you to just take a deep breath, and I want you to hold it for a second. Now let it out, because we don't need anybody passing out. And I want you to just think about what a simple action that is, but how important and how critical it is. It's critical for those of us who work on climate change issues and environmental justice issues. It's also critical for us who also focus on the unfortunate loss of life that sometimes happens by actions by others. We have to make sure that we are protecting that important and critical breath for all of the work that we do. So with that being said, we're going to transition now, and I believe that there's a few questions that we're going to answer. I just want to thank you all so much for all of the amazing work that you have done and that I know you will continue to do. And, you know, as someone who started working on these issues when I was a teenager, I'm just so blessed to see so many incredible leaders, especially young leaders who are willing to stand up and push and do the right thing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mustafa Ali. Those of you on the call with your video on, could you just give him some silent appreciation? I hope you're able to see that, Mustafa. Thank you so much again. I think that sometimes in Alaska here, it's really easy for us to feel like we're alone in our struggles and that our situation is unique up here. I think I just want to thank you for challenging us to like see ourselves as part of a global movement and a national movement for change, and for challenging us to, you know, really move forward by creating an intergenerational movement for change and bringing our movements up here in Alaska into relationship with the rest of the nation. Yeah. I want to kick it off to go into our Q&A section. We have a few questions that we have pre-lined up for Mustafa, and I'm going to ask those first. But if you would like to ask a question, could you please put your question in the chat? And I will call on your name, and Ryan, shout out to our tech person, can unmute you to ask that question for Mustafa. Does that sound good, everyone? Thumbs up? Cool. So to kick it off, I want to pass it to Iris. Iris is one of our teen leaders from Alaska Youth for Environmental Action, and she has a question that Aya wanted to ask you, Mustafa. Are you ready, Iris?
So you have a lot of experience with youth-led organizers, and we were wondering, What are some of the most effective youth-led campaigns you've seen, and why were they so effective?
Mm-hmm. I think that all of them are effective just in different ways, because some may have, some slightly different focuses. I think the most effective ones are the ones that make sure that they are honoring and bringing in lots of different youth voices from different experiences and different ethnic and racial groups. I think that the ones that are also really effective are utilizing some of the new technology that's out there and using that to not only mobilize folks and bring folks together, but also for storytelling. A reoccurring theme you will hear me probably in almost all my answers is those organizations who are also incorporating the arts and culture into not only the work that they do, but also their priority setting. And it's just amazing how that formula really galvanizes folks and pushes folks and brings in accountability. I get excited. So if you hear my voice, I'm getting excited when I think about the incredible work that young people are doing. That's a part of I see is really moving folks. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Mustafa, next question is from Carly Dennis. She is an AIA program alum, longtime Alaskan young leader, one of my good friends. Carly, I know you have a question to ask. Would you like to go?
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Ali, for your words. I was really curious about your thoughts on where the most effective sphere for change in terms of on an individual level or on a community and collective level, because I think a lot of times more progressive movements struggle with the language of personal responsibility and individual action, because on the one hand we realize that personal responsibility is pretty conservative language, and that a lot of the injustices that are happening are really on a systems-wide scale, and that they're happening at the top, with corporations and leaders who aren't listening. But at the same time, I think we also recognize, like you mentioned, I mean, each of us holds an enormous amount of power. And I think the recent action that so many people have been taking around the injustices of in Minnesota with George Floyd, and so many people speaking out on that as individuals and using that power, I think really shows that, I mean, it can also happen on an individual level. So, and I realize that this is something that might have, kind of a combination. But I'm just curious, kind of your thoughts on personal responsibility and to what degree that language is useful or helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all do have personal responsibility but many of us, it's always interesting. So I just believe in real talk. So, folks love to talk about sustainability and resiliency and the terms that folks use. For many, folks of color and others, that has been a part of how they were raised. And for others, maybe not so much. But, I always want to honor the fact that we've already been doing lots of the right things when it comes to folks of color. But also on the personal responsibility side, there are some things that we can do, and we have choices to make. It doesn't matter, who we are. So, how we utilize our dollars and who we are willing to give our dollars to is a personal choice. And that's a personal choice, whether we're 12 years old or we're 92 years old. So if we are supporting those who continue to, impact our communities and to do damage to our communities, then that is a personal choice that we're making. Now, of course, there's the educational aspect of it that, we have a responsibility information to make trusted source and, that we're validating it. But we have a lot of power that sometimes we give away, especially around how we utilize our dollars, and the simple things that we do and the choices that we make every day. Now, with that being said, there are, of course, these much larger systemic types of issues that we have to deal with. From everything, you know, from racism to the choices that are being made around pollution and where it's located, to the choices that are being made, you know, around larger divestment types of things, so forth and so on. And that requires a movement to address those respective issues. And that's why, both on the personal side, we can do some things. But on the larger side, we need all kinds of different folks being able to come together to actually be able to make this change, this transition, you know, that we all not only want and not only need, but we are going to make happen. So, you know, we just have to continue to understand that the majority of the work is larger than just ourselves, but that we still have power to make real change actually happen. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much.
Mustafa, I really like how you framed like challenging ourselves to think about what power do we have in our lives with our decisions that we make on a daily basis and what power we're giving away. So thank you for that. Next question is from Ayu Kasatuk, our friend and community leader. Ayu, are you on and ready?
Yes, Kuyanakbak. Ayu Lurunga. I am Ayu Kasatuk. Ungalaklik Mirurunga. I come from Ungalaklik. I live and work here in Dirayakak, also known as Anchorage, like many of the folks on this call. Kuyanakbak, thank you so much for your words. And even more importantly, the work that you have done and continue to do. It's really important heart and firework that you're doing. So just want to express my appreciation for that. I was kind of wrestling with how to frame this into a question. So maybe I'll just kind of reflect on what I'm wrestling with a little bit. With everything that's happening in our world right now, I'm sitting here and I'm feeling this intense amount of tension and energy for the absolute injustice that is playing out in front of our eyes right now. And like so many of you, I'm also carrying that hurt and that anger in my body. And as we're talking about personal responsibility, we know, as it was mentioned, how conservative often that is, that just that terminology is coded so often. And I'm just really reflecting on how people of color carry an undue weight when it comes to personal responsibility. And when it comes to environmental justice, it's even more so, because racism is literally killing our planet as well as the people that live in it. And so thinking about personal responsibility, looking at the beautiful faces of all the people that are on this call, I know that you have such strong hearts for our planet and for our community. And many of you are white. Most of you are white. And with that comes a tremendous amount of power that can be put to use to help advance and give voice to the injustice that's happening right now to our people and to our planet. And so, you know, in our work at First Alaskans Institute, we do a lot of conversations around how we can help our white family become stronger advocates, so they move from being an ally to a co-conspirator in the work. And so that's an area of interest that I have. How can we activate the tremendous power that is on this call, just even looking at all of your beautiful faces, if we can help grow our fluency around the issues of racism, how it intersects with environmental justice, social justice, all of those things. Not to put more work on the Alaska Center, but you clearly are really great at convening amazing, passionate white folks. So what would it look like to host a training around moving from ally to advocate? Again, that's not necessarily a question, but it's something that I'm wrestling with. I think that there's a tremendous opportunity and responsibility right now. And I know that we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but here in Anchorage, Degayakak, There's going to be a social distance rally that's primarily focused on Black Lives Matter tomorrow, but is also uplifting our missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. It's going to be tomorrow here in Anchorage at 2 p.m. There's also a social distance I Can't Breathe rally planned for Tanan, also known as Fairbanks, tomorrow, which I would also encourage folks to participate in. So I would welcome and love to hear what you have to say about any and all of that, Mustafa, and also open it up for other folks to be able to respond and talk about how we can amplify our power.
Yeah. Well, I don't, thank you so much. And I don't want to take away from the Alaska Center, but I will share a couple of my ideas or thoughts. And it's funny, I had a conversation earlier today with someone who may end up, well, let me stop. Y'all find out more about that conversation. But so I shared with folks that folks of color will continue to stand on the front lines and continue to push and fight and build, but folks of color do not have the responsibility for racism. And that folks of color did not create it, so we cannot stop it. So others who were a part of the design of that, and that may have been people who were way before any of us were born, of course, but they are the ones who have to come together and make the decision that this is no longer acceptable. And we do see brothers and sisters who are doing that. And a part of that process means that there's some real work and intentionality that has to be in that space. And that means that if you say that you want to be an ally, that is not a drive-by exercise. That is not a parachuting exercise to show up just for a rally or a march. That means that you have some work to do to unpack and to learn and to truly become the best person that you can be so that you can really actually be an ally. And that doesn't mean that any of us in our lifetime will get rid of all the baggage that comes, but we can get rid of a lot of it and take the garbage away, if I can say it that way, and replace it with positive, spiritual, healing energy that then transforms who you are in the way that you see the world and the way that you interact with others. So for me, and the folks that I've seen who have been very authentic in that space, they've been willing to make that investment. And that investment happens on the personal level, but that investment also happens on an organizational level. And we've got to be willing to do that. And thankfully, there are some that are moving in that direction. And thankfully, as I said before, a number of younger people have less baggage. That doesn't mean that they don't have some than maybe their parents or their grandparents brought. So now is the time when you're young to actually, get it right so that you can even go further in life and in advocacy and being a real, true, authentic ally.
Thank you very much, Mustafa, and thank you so much, Ayu, for that question. I think one thing I'm thinking of is, this stepping into allyship is a lifelong journey, and it requires us to conduct so much unlearning of racism and oppression that we have learned throughout our years. I think, this is also a long-term process, but there's also like immediate things that we can do to show up for our communities in this time. And I think that's a great segue. Thank you for that question. I'm going to toss it back to Polly for our call to action and closing.
Thank you, Kengo, and Koyanakpuk Ayu for bringing the question and the statement forward that needs to be said in this space. And so much thanks to Mustafa for just bringing us into this space. I just wanted to share before closing out that, Ayu has been a really incredible teacher and partner for me in taking the responsibility and really owning that and learning how to own that in terms of why we need to be recognizing Indigenous lands, why we need to be supporting as white people and not centering ourselves and not being in front, but actually also doing the emotional labor of supporting and moving into action. And it's been a really hard and wonderful and continuing to be wonderful journey. I also want to just give a shout out to another friend and mentor, Ine Begay, who is on this conversation, because I don't think that we would be here, or that I would have been wanting to have this conversation today if it hadn't been for years of learning and work with all of you. So thank you. And we have so much more to do. So that's what we're going to talk about: action. Coming into community together to, foster our vision, and thinking about vision here today, as everyone said, is wonderful and great and powerful, and we can do that together, but we have to manifest that with action, and we need compassionate action. I want to say that the Alaska Center officially is standing in solidarity with communities who are experiencing racial violence, and we will be supporting both events tomorrow, in Anchorage and Fairbanks, the Fairbanks one being co-hosted by Native Movement and NAACP Fairbanks. The one in Anchorage, I will just say again, it's 2 o'clock tomorrow at the Sears parking lot if you want to go there. It's from 2 to 3 p.m. People will be asked to be in cars. There will be signs for calls to action, and also names that people can be holding. If you can't go in person and you don't want to be in a physical presence with other people, you can tune in to Out North Radio at 106.1 FM tomorrow afternoon. And then again, the Fairbanks I Can't Breathe rally is from 2 to 5 p.m. at Veterans Memorial Park downtown. As a final closing, I just want to say thank you all for being here, for bringing sunlight into this conversation, and for acting together. We can make our home the one that we envision, and I am very much looking forward to doing that with all of you. So thank you all for being here today. And I guess we'll say bye with our jazz hands. And thank you so much again, Mustafa. You can do a round of applause if you can actually clap, do jazz hands. We're so honored and grateful. Thank you.